and call the meeting to order, that would be fine.
Good evening, everyone, council, staff, and guests, and all those being at home. This is welcome to our council meeting for Monday, December the 6th. First off, our mission statement: Strathroy-Caradoc's communities will provide economic opportunities, well-being, and places to call home for residents and businesses. Our mission: we serve the communities of Strathroy-Caradoc by delivering modern municipal services, proactively planning for the future, and facilitating partnerships that advance our goals. And first up, we have a roll call where I just want to make regrets for our mayor. She's away tonight, so we wish her well, and we'll see her back at the next meeting. That brings us to item number 1, declaration of pecuniary interests. Do we have any tonight by any councillor? Hearing none, moving on. Presentation, delegations, and petitions. We have 2 petitions tonight. 2.1, petition for drainage works is for the Caradoc Concession 9, Part Lot 13, South Grove Subdivision. Is anyone speaking to this one, Fred?
Director Strauss is here, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Jake, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Richards. Through you, so this drainage petition attached is in addition to an original petition for the South Grove development. So these additional signatures are required for a legal outlet for the Strathroy Crossings land. There is currently no storm sewer available on the lands. They are simply a soak-away pit. And with the future development proposed within those lands, this is required, especially because the existing sewers don't have capacity.
Thank you very much. Any questions to the department head? Hearing none. The recommendation here is council accept the petition and authorize Spreets Associates to prepare an engineering report on this matter. Do we have a mover and seconder? By Councillor Brennan, Councillor Feldman seconds it. Further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Or all, sorry, anyone opposed? Gotta get the mayor's training on that one. Okay, moving on. Thank you very much. 2.2, petition for drainage works, Caradoc Concession 4, Part Lot 12, 13, and 14, the Hill and Ballantyne properties. Jake, I guess you're still up.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Richards. So through you, this drainage petition for Caradoc Concession 4, north part of Lot 12, 13, and 14 is to convert a natural wetland area into a municipal drain to provide a legal outlet for both of the residents on the signing petition so that they can have some more usable land.
Again, pretty straightforward, but any questions to Jake on this one? Hearing none, then the motion here is council accept the petition and authorize Spreets and Associates to prepare an engineering report on this matter. Do we have a mover and seconder? Councillor Hippel, Councillor Cowan, seconds. Further discussion? All in favor or all opposed? It's carried. Thanks. I'll have it for the 3rd time. Thank you very much. Moving on to public meetings. We have one tonight, and the purpose of this public meeting is to review the proposed building fees for the municipality of Strathroy-Caradoc. And first off, we needed a motion to open the public meeting. Moved by Councillor Baker and Councillor Kennis. Anyone opposed? It's carried. Thanks. So reporting to present the report will be presented by Building Planning and Director Jennifer Huff.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Richards. Council members, tonight I just wanted to say a few words about the proposed building bylaw update and fee review. Tonight we have Glenn Tunnock, who is our consultant. He will be making a presentation later this evening. And then as well, we have Joe Christians, Chief Building Official, and he's here also to say a few words. So just before I turn it over to Glenn, Joe and I just wanted to provide some background and some brief details about this project. So originally at the beginning of the year, it started just as a fee review. One is really required to be done every 5 years. And we hadn't done one since 2016. So our fees have not changed or been indexed since 2016. We thought now was an appropriate time to undertake that review. And as you know, staff have, and the building division has really changed substantially since 2016 with additional staff, new capital, new equipment, et cetera, as well. Building permits have really skyrocketed since 2014-15, which was the context that the building fees were set back in 2016. So we initiated this review earlier this year. Halfway through that review, we realized as well that our building bylaw itself, which really sets out the policies and parameters that we issue permits under, it was not updated since 2006, I believe. And so this also needed to be updated. And so staff have been working diligently at updating that bylaw at the same time. Joe Christians, Chief Building Official, as well as our plans reviewer and inspectors, Shane Hughes and Connor McKecken, were really instrumental in getting all of the background information required in order to undertake this review, to undertake various reviews and amendments to the fee bylaw as well as the policy. So I just want to give kudos out to them because this wouldn't come forward without their assistance. And then Joe, in addition to the fees, Joe is here also to speak quickly about some of the items that is included in the new building bylaw before we move over to Glenn's presentation. So I'll leave it to Joe at this point.
Thank you, Jennifer. Through Deputy Mayor Richards, a couple of the new items I'll touch upon for the new bylaw would be to update the list of permits and permit forms that we collect fees on, and it's to more accurately reflect the building permits being issued. Other items in Schedule B would be to be more in line with the objective-based codes, and that would be wording regarding, say, alternate solutions, which may come as a bit of surprise. It has more to do with a prescriptive-based code compared to an objective-based code. So that's a more modernization of our building bylaw. The Schedule C also includes a code of conduct, which is listed in the for council to have enacted for building inspectors and the chief building official. That is a brief summation, and Glenn, I'm sure, will help along with the review process. Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe we'll turn it over to Glenn. Glenn has quite a bit of history with us. He's done our previous review. He's done these reviews for many municipalities in the area, as well as just generally for municipalities across Southern Ontario. So I think actually ours is one of the last ones before he retires. I think he may actually kind of be retired now, but has offered to do this presentation nonetheless. So I do appreciate all his work and effort on this. And Joe and I are also available after his presentation to answer any questions that you may have. So I turn it over to Glenn. And I know we have a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes. Do you want to pull that up then, Jennifer?
Can you see that now, everyone?
Yes. I just want to make sure that you can hear me okay. Can everybody hear me okay? So it's certainly a pleasure to meet with your council once again. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Brad Richards, for accommodating me. It's been a pleasure working with your municipality. And I would be remiss at this point if I did not mention the help that Jennifer and Joe have provided for me or with me during the preparation of this report. And if the kind of diligence and industry that they showed in providing that information to me is any indication of what they do for the public, your municipality is very well served by Jennifer's work and by Joe's work as well. So they should be commended for that effort. I am a land use planner by background, so I have the same background as Jennifer. But during the course of my career as a planner, I had the occasion to be a building official as well. And when I entered into private practice, I tried to develop a niche expertise in the preparation of building permit fee review studies. And as Jennifer has indicated, I've done these for many municipalities across Ontario, including your municipality back in 2005. And I don't look for accolades necessarily, but as a result of doing your study back in 2005, your municipality is in an excellent financial position with respect to the funds that you have in your reserve to back up the building inspection service. So you've done very well. And what that means is that there is no dollars spent from the municipal property tax revenues for this kind of service. So there's no private subsidy by public dollars on this particular service. And I think that bodes well. And certainly my intent in undertaking this current review is to ensure that you will continue in that manner for the foreseeable future. Because I don't think I'll be back for the next study if there's any indication of the time difference between the first study and this study. I'll be in my 90s, and I don't think I'll be back to help you. But again, it's been a pleasure working with you. So perhaps we'll move forward to the next slide. So my mandate was to review the building permit fee schedule that Jennifer mentioned a few minutes ago, to look at the permit volumes over a period of 5 years. And the purpose for that is to ensure that we understood what the trends were and to get an average, if you wish, of the permit volumes over that particular period of time. We then, my mandate was to update the fees to reflect current costs and using the 2021 budget and also the projected 2022 costs, because one of the tasks was to consider the salary and the benefits impacts of new employees that the municipality is hiring next year to also add to the building inspection service function that you carry out. And then the mandate was to recommend new fees to reflect the scope of the services using a full cost recovery financial model. And that's the core of it, is this full cost recovery financial model, which, as I mentioned earlier, means that there's no public subsidy from taxpayer dollars of the user service of the building inspection department. And finally was to help Joe and Jennifer with updating the building bylaw and the code of conduct. Next slide. So the legislative framework is set out in the Building Code Act, and that's what we use as the enabling authority in the background to the work we do. So Section 7.2 allows a municipality or enables a municipality to provide for fees that don't exceed the anticipated reasonable costs. And that's underlined because in the past, and the reason for the change in the legislation back about 20 years ago was that municipalities would collect fees and use them for other purposes than the building inspection service. So the intent here is to focus on the real costs of the building inspection service. And under 7.6 is to provide public notice and a meeting, as we're doing this evening, on any change in the proposed fees or new fees that are proposed as a result of the review. Next slide. So the general intent of the legislation is to ensure accountability and transparency. So the study that I did, the report that I did, is a public report. It's should be available to anybody in the building industry or the private sector that wants to see it, because it sets out in great detail how the process was undertaken to calculate the fees. And there are probably 1,000 calculations carried out as a result. So there's a lot of numbers. And to ensure, in this case, again, full cost recovery for your building service. And finally, public disclosure for the changes in fees. Again, having a public meeting to disclose to the public and to the building industry what your proposed fee schedule would be and any new fees that would be introduced. Next slide. So the methodology that I have used for your municipality and many, many others is to, again, review the building permit activity to look at trends over a 5-year period, to review the building inspection process, because that certainly has an implication on the time spent to undertake various components of the building inspection service. to conduct a time allocation for building staff and support staff. And the reason for that is to calculate the actual costs associated with the number of hours that are worked for staff or by staff, sorry, for the various components of the building inspection service. And then to calculate the indirect and direct costs. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail, but the legislation does talk about indirect and direct costs for affected departments that are there to provide the direct service or support services for the building department. And to calculate building permit fees designed to recover all of your costs for providing that particular service. And then also to provide some adjustments to the fees, partly to ensure that there is continued revenue stream to your cost stabilization reserve fund, which is currently in the order of $1.5 million to my understanding. And to also ensure that building permit fees are reasonable for various types of projects. Next slide. So here is just a schematic of the building process, the building permit process. And I think most councillors will probably be familiar with this. Phase one is the application submission, and there's a prescribed form that's used by municipalities, prepared by the province. Subsequent to that, the building staff will review applications, and that's largely a review of the plans that are submitted, the building drawings that are submitted. Thirdly is to issue the permit itself, collect the necessary fees. And finally, phase four, which is the most important part of the process, is to undertake inspections, because it's where the inspections are undertaken that ensure construction is safe. And that's the great value to the public of the building service, is to ensure that the construction is safe and well-founded. Next slide, please. So the design of the fee structure consists of 2 or 3 components. First is to calculate the indirect costs. So those are the costs associated with the support services provided by various municipal departments to the building department. That includes the administration, kind of the overhead costs, and any enforcement or legal costs associated with that component. So you add to that the calculation of the direct costs. So this is the costs of the building department itself, salaries and benefits for administration, as well as enforcement should there be orders that are issued or legal action taken to enforce the Building Code Act. So the two of those add to the total costs, and then those total costs are divided by the permits that are issued for various categories. Next slide. So the indirect costs, again, are the operating and capital costs of all building permit related services that are provided by other municipal departments to the building department. In other words, the building department doesn't act as an island unto itself. It's dependent on other departments to provide services or support for the building function. And that's essentially the cost of doing business to support that service. So here's an indication of the support services, the departments that provide support services to the building department. So IT provides the technical assistance on computers and so forth that are required. Finance, responsible for procurement, for administration of the budget, and for lodging of all the financial revenues that come in from building permit fees. The fire department provides expertise on fire-related safety matters. HR is your personnel component. Environmental services provides support for water and sewer connections, lot grading, things of that nature. Planning department provides a review of the zoning to ensure that the development complies with the zoning bylaw, and possibly a site plan agreement as well. Council, of course, administers the entire process. You adopt building bylaws, And the CAO and clerk is the overall manager of the municipal operation and of the coordination of the various departments in supporting the building department. Next slide. So what we did then was to calculate almost to the penny the cost of the support services that are provided. So for example, with the finance officer, we looked at the percentage of time spent on building related duties times the number of hours over the course of a year times the salary and benefits plus the overhead. So for your finance officer or director of finance, we determined that 1% of that person's time was spent in providing building related support, or roughly 32.8 hours a year times salary and benefits, and that amounted to $1,681.32. And then that person's share of the overall cost was $1,763.15, and for a combined total of $3,444.47. So we undertook a kind of calculation for each and every employee in the various departments that provide support to the building department, including council. So next slide provides you with a summary of the total indirect costs provided by all of those departments and by council. So if you total that up, it totaled $75,616.55. So you can see that from that, council, that there is a lot of support that's necessary and provided by other departments to make sure that the building department functions smoothly and efficiently. Next slide, please. So then we looked at the total direct costs. So these are the costs of the building department itself, the salary and benefits costs, which totaled $590,500. And that amount reflects the additional staff that are anticipated being hired in 2022 to provide the support services you require. And then the associated overhead, that's postage and stamps and your IT services and training, all related services amounted to $64,475. But deducted from the total was 10%, because the building department doesn't operate 100% of its time providing the service. There are included in that 10% would be, for example, vacation time. It could be training time. It could be departmental management. So functions that they might undertake that are aside from the actual building permits that are issued. So we reduced the total by 10%. So the total recoverable costs, in other words, the costs that can be assigned to building permits, is $595,925. Next slide. So if you look at that figure of indirect costs, $75,617, and you add the total direct costs, the total recoverable costs, according to the enabling authority of the Building Code Act, is $671,542 for Strathroy-Caradoc. Next slide. So then we looked at the individual categories of building permits. I'm not sure if council is aware of the classification of permit types and services based on the occupancy groups, but C occupancy group is your residential component. Your occupancy group F is industrial. So there are various types of land uses that are associated with those particular occupancy groups. Then there's other types of permits that are issued, change of use permits, demolition permits. There are permits for farms and solid fuel appliances. And as Joe pointed out at the outset when he was making his presentation, a new fee will be for alternatives. So for example, if somebody has a proposal to build a dwelling out of styrofoam or some unusual component, it can be considered as an alternative option, and there's got to be a fee to obviously cover the costs and time of reviewing that alternative. So then the time allocation was applied to all phases of the building inspection process, and we'll show you an example in a minute. And that was multiplied by the hourly rate for salaries and benefits and overhead to determine your direct and indirect costs. And then a per unit cost was derived to determine the proposed fee. Next slide. So here's an example of the calculation for building permit for a single detached dwelling. So the chief building official, you look at the chart on the right-hand side, spends on average, and that's say it's on average. Obviously, it will vary depending on the dwelling in question. In some cases, you may run into somebody that's inexperienced, and therefore the CBO has to spend more time, or you may have a development builder that builds a lot of tract housing, and they may be very efficient, so the building official, the CBO, may spend less time. But on average, the chief building official spends about 3.5 hours of his time in the process, amounting to $232.44. The inspector is the key building official in the process, and that 17 hours respects or includes things such as the review of the building permit application, the review of the building plans, and about 10 hours of that 17 is the actual on-site inspections that are undertaken by the inspector. As I said, the most important component of the building inspection process. And that comes to $1,050.94. The administrator, or your building clerk, is somebody that oversees the records management, if you wish, and the administrative details of the permit filing, things of that nature, and that amounts to $40.33 for 1 hour of work. So the total number of hours required to process a building permit from the kind of the alpha omega, from beginning to end, to the sign off at the very end, is say 21.5 hours. And that's fairly consistent with most other municipalities. I've seen some as low as 19 hours, and I've seen some as high as about 25 hours. The 21.5 is also in part a reflection of the skill set that your building officials have. Some building departments have much more experienced building officials than others. So the total direct costs of salaries and benefits or salaries in this case for the process is $1,323.71. The associated overhead per permit for the building department is $146.09. So this reflects your supplies of paper, your postage, IT services, and things of that nature. Then you move to the total indirect costs. As you will recall, that's about $75,000. And that divided amongst the number of permits that you issue in the course of a year works out to about $166.32. And then the legal costs, $5.01. So the total then that we've estimated or costed out for the processing of a permit for a single detached dwelling is $1,641.13. So next slide. So then there are certain adjustments that we make to that particular figure of 1641. So we move to the next slide. And I apologize to council for the details here. There's a lot of information that's presented. So I'll just try and go over the major components. If you look at line 2 towards the top, I'll just move across that particular line or row because that's the one we've essentially been talking about. We've been talking about the single detached dwelling, which is a Group C low density residential use. So you can see the base fee that I showed you the calculation for of 1641.13. And then there's what we call a cross subsidy adjustment. Now what that is an adjustment to ensure that permits for minor projects or lesser projects are not so exorbitant that people avoid obtaining a building permit. So if you take the cursor down to the deck as an example, you move the cursor down that row to the deck, you'll see the deck is $300. And that's the fee, the cost for processing a deck permit is in the order of $500 to $600, and that's an amount that most people would object to. So what we've tried to do here is to adjust the fees for those lesser permits or minor permits, as I call them, and the differential between the actual cost and the $300 is then transferred to the major fees, and that's what we call the cross subsidy. So there's $50,000 or $60,000 that's reallocated to the major permits, and notwithstanding that, the major permits are still reasonable. So the adjustment for the cross subsidy moves from go back to line 2 from 1641.13 to 2241.13. And then under column D, this is the revenue stream that has helped you to build your costs reserve stabilization fund, the reserve fund that provides for situations where you may have a year with very low or lesser permit volumes and may not have the revenues coming in to cover the cost of providing the service. So that's where you can draw from the reserve fund. You could also draw from the reserve fund if you're going to purchase new hardware. It could be new computers for the building department. It could be a subsidy of the computers for some of the other departments providing the support services. It could be the acquisition of a municipal vehicle used for building inspection services. So in the previous study that I did back in 2005, I think I'd recommended 10%, and that's helped you to build your reserve to what it is today. And notwithstanding the amount in the reserve, if you get a series of years with low permit activity, you could eat up that reserve very quickly. So the 5% adjustment then brings the building permit for a single detached dwelling up to $2,363.19. Under column E, this is an adjustment that would be made for larger buildings. So for example, the average floor area for a dwelling in Strathroy-Caradoc is around 2,000 square feet. And so the 21.5 hours that I had suggested or calculated earlier is what's required to process a permit for roughly that square footage of floor area for a single detached dwelling. Now we do recognize that there are dwellings that are constructed that are larger than the 2,000 square feet. You may get monster homes of 4,000 and 5,000 square feet, depending on the circumstances. And obviously, those larger homes require more time to be spent by building officials to review the plans and to conduct the inspections, the required inspections. So column E provides for an adjustment for larger projects. So again, you're looking at full cost recovery for that additional time and effort spent to review building plans for larger projects and to conduct the necessary inspections as well. So there's an adjustment. Now, admittedly, it's hard to determine the revenue stream that might come from that because obviously the number and types of dwellings vary from year to year. But that does give you an opportunity to collect for larger projects. And that applies not just to residential development. You run your cursor down the column E, you'll see adjustments for commercial buildings, for industrial buildings, and even for minor alterations as the case may be. So column F is the total number of permits. So this is the average number of permits over the last 5 years. And then column G is a multiplication of the number of permits times the proposed fee for with the reserve fund. So the revenue stream that would be anticipated for 174 single detached dwellings on average would be 410,000 plus in the course of a year, and that includes the 5% for the reserve fund. Now, if council does have this option, if council doesn't choose to charge or levy a reserve fund percentage, then the revenue stream would be 390,000 and change. So that would be the 174 times the column C, basically, and that's the stream you would get. So if you roll down to the bottom of this particular table, you'll see that in the bottom of column H, if you were not to charge a reserve fund surcharge, the revenue stream would be $673,000, and the revenue stream with the 5% is 732,000. So with those kinds of dollars generated based on the average building permit activity, those are the kinds of revenues that would be required to ensure that you have sufficient funds for the cost of your building department without subsidy from the municipal tax dollar. Next slide. So the eligible cost recovery is estimated at 603,000, revenue without the CSRF 589. And these figures should be adjusted to that table. I have to apologize. They're a bit different because these figures were based on the figures without the additional municipal staff. So I apologize. Those figures will be a bit different, but the revenue generation, the bottom line for adding to your reserve fund would probably be in the order of $60,000 to $70,000. The last slide. Second last slide, I guess the recommendations that I'm making to council is that you adopt a building permit fee regime that includes provision for revenues to be directed to the cost stabilization reserve fund to ensure that you have enough money in that reserve fund should there be a decline in building permit activity and you still have the operational costs to cover. Now the table 5 in the report, which I just went over, I'm recommending a fee structure that will ensure the cost recovery for the revenues that, for the cost of the service required. And third recommendation, and this is a new feature that I'm recommending to your municipality as I have to others. And Jennifer mentioned this briefly at the outset, is to provide for an index so that you can adjust your fees annually without having to go back and having a public meeting each year. So this will enable you to ensure that the revenues that you receive for building permits will continue to cover your operational costs and generate some fund, your reserve fund as well. And this kind of puts me out of business in a sense, and that's good in the sense that you're saving money from consultant costs to do the review because you're making the changes within the municipality each year. In this case, I've recommended the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, as the federal guideline, if you wish, and it's a fairly widely accepted guideline as the instrument that you would use to calculate an adjustment from year to year. I'm also recommending that you adopt a new building bylaw, and I've been working with Joe and Jennifer. We've looked at several examples and suggested changes to the building bylaw to ensure that it's right up to date and most importantly, or more importantly, gives Joe the delegated authority to do things that he could not do before. One of which was to provide for the review of the of alternative options for building, and the other is to provide for an agreement for a conditional permit to expedite the process. The final recommendation is with respect to affordable housing. It's a challenge that your council probably recognizes, as many other councils do, that it's a difficult issue because it's difficult to get commitments from the private sector to build affordable housing. But what we're providing for in the building bylaw as an option is cost relief, in the sense that the building permit fee for a single detached dwelling, as an example, could be waived where there's a guarantee that the cost of the house that was going to be put on the market would meet your criteria for affordable housing. So this is a way of responding positively to a foreseeable need for those with low and moderate incomes in your community. So with that, that's my presentation, Deputy Mayor, and I'm certainly amenable to any questions that Council may have. I apologize for a lot of the financial details that are there, and I believe, though, the Council has had the opportunity to read my report. But as I say, I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Jennifer and Joe. Glenn, it was a great detailed report. Thank you very much. Because this is a public meeting, I will ask the regular questions we get during a public meeting. Is there any comments in support of the building fees? Second time, any comments in support of the building fees? Last time out, any support of the proposed building fees? Hearing none, then we'll move to comments in opposition to the building fees. Perhaps I will ask CEO Tranquilli, did anyone log in, Fred, that you know of?
Mr. Chair, there is no one in the waiting room for this matter or any others.
Thank you very much. So I'll just read one more time here. Any comments in opposition to the proposed building fees? Hearing none, then comments or questions from members of council. Any comments or questions? Councillor Flagel.
Few questions, but I'll start with the usual notice period. So there's a recommendation that if approved by council tonight, that these would come into effect January 1st, 2022. What is the standard notice period for something like this, in terms of letting the community and obviously the building community know that adjustments are being made? I know there were notices put out that this meeting was happening, but as far as the recommendations, if approved, I'm just curious what is reasonable given it's December the 6th.
Through the Deputy Mayor, Councillor, there is no standard. My experience with the 40-odd municipalities across the province is it varies dramatically. Sometimes the municipality will pass the bylaw as the public meeting, and the fees come into force the next day. What we did in your municipality was to try and provide a reasonable period between what we're doing tonight as a public meeting and the time when the bylaw would be adopted. We had hoped to have a longer period of time, but because we made some significant adjustments to the report in October, it delayed the process a bit. So it was anticipated we'd have maybe 2 months or maybe even 2.5 months at one particular point. So so it was the intent, though, was to try and put a bylaw in place that would be brand new for 2022, so that any new permit that came in at that period of time would be subject to the new fees. But as I say, it varies from municipality to municipality.
The second question, I have the report open, but I think it was in one of the other attachments. I found it interesting that the single detached rate, if I read this correctly, is actually going down for the larger sized buildings. Is that the norm, that something would go down in this day and age? And can you perhaps explain that? Looking at the comparators, obviously the larger buildings seem to be the more expensive, and I don't know if that's by design that some municipalities put. I don't want to call it a disincentive. I don't know what the correct wording would be on some of these larger homes versus smaller homes. I'm just curious if you could speak to that briefly.
Yeah. Well, again, the process is a process of calculation, and the fee structure will change depending on what your costs are and so forth. And I think the intent here is to reflect the actual costs to the best, as best as we can, and to also ensure, if I can say this, that there is no discouraging aspect to people applying for building permits, even though the actual cost of the building permit as part of the total cost is probably less than 1% in most circumstances. It may be even less than that. So but I think it puts you at a competitive advantage, even though I will always argue that your fees are independent of any other municipality, because your cost structure will be different from any other municipality as well. But I think it's fortunate that, as I say, the financial management of your municipality, since I made the recommendation back in 2005, has been so good that you're in an excellent financial position, and therefore you can sustain a lesser fee for those larger projects and still not have to worry about having enough money, having enough revenue to cover your costs.
Thank you.
Anyone else from council? Councillor Kennis.
A couple of short questions. Just wondering where a multifamily residential would fit in when it comes to permits. Are they charged a permit fee per unit, or is there some other formula for that type of property?
It's basically on a per unit basis.
And the second one, actually, probably you've already kind of referred to it. I assume this continues to make us competitive with surrounding municipalities when it comes to these types of permits.
Yeah, I always want to be careful, and I want to make sure council understands this, that your fees are calculated based on your costs and so forth. And some cases, the costs are substantially more because the building permit volumes are less, and therefore you have to spread more costs on fewer permits. You are in a very healthy situation because you've got a very good permit volume, and therefore you really don't have to worry as much as other municipalities. But the end result is you are very competitive, and that obviously puts you at an advantage. Although admittedly, I don't think people move into a municipality based on what the building permit fees might be. So it's, I guess the fact that your building industry has not come to the municipality and said, "We're about your building permit fees," says a lot right there. I think they're probably pretty happy with the fees that you're charging. And I think you're, as I said before, in an excellent position as a municipality financially because of the way you've administered the process. And so you're keeping an eye, and monitoring is important. And Jennifer and Joe, I think, will do that. Is that you always have the choice each year of upping your fees or leaving them at the same level. So I would encourage council in January 2023, I guess, or the new council to again look at what the revenue flow is or revenue stream is relative to what your operational costs are. And you might increase the fees or you might leave them alone.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess since we don't have a virtual room full of people to comment on these things, I guess that's a pretty good indication that it's in line. So.
Councillor Brennan. Oh, sorry. Glenn.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was intrigued by the suggestion made by the presenter and supported, I think, by our planning department that council considered doing an indexing on these building permits over a period of time, so the department won't be having to come back to us on a constant basis to ask for council to approve increases. What measure would you consider appropriate for council to consider for the indexing? Would this be a cost of living assessment, inflation? I mean, what would we use as a standard to justify using an index to prevent us having to come back each year and increase the fees?
Yeah, well, as I indicated, the instrument that is that I'm suggesting is the CPI, because that's the one that really truly reflects an average for an area. So I think the advantage of the CPI is that it's not focused on an individual municipality; it's focused on a much broader area. So it's kind of regional or provincial in a sense, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And that, of course, looks at reflects to some extent your inflation rates, which you have to be conscious of, and then of course your COLA, your cost of living adjustment. My experience is that the CPI is not inordinate, if I can use that term, in providing for an adjustment. So it's not like, well, this year our fees are X number of dollars and they're going to increase by 5% next year. That would be way too much. I think you'll find that with your CPI, your adjustments will probably be in the 1 to 3% range at the very most.
Thank you.
Anyone further in council? I don't see any more hands up. So then I would ask for a motion to close this public meeting, please. Moved by Councillor Kennis, Councillor Pelkman, seconds. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And now we need to have a resolution on the decision. And I'll read the recommendation that we do have in front of us. That council receive report BBP, 2021-84, as well as all the attached reports for information, and that per section 7.1.1 of the Building Code Act, enact a new building bylaw and code of conduct for building officials and inspectors, and such bylaw and code of conduct be placed on the municipal website for public viewing, and that council adopts the recommended fee structure set out in Appendix 1, including the cost stabilization reserve fund, and that the municipality of Strathroy-Caradoc levies an annual adjustment in permit fees based on the Consumer Price Index available through Stats Canada, and that council repeal bylaw number 3006 as amended. A little wordy, but it's all in there for you. And I would look to have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Councillor Kennis, Councillor Brennan. Further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Glenn and Jennifer, for all your hard work, and Joe, thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to the approval of minutes. And this is the regular council meeting minutes from, it should be November 15th. I think my copy said December, but so it should be from November 15th. I'd be looking for a mover and seconder, please. For the minutes, Councillor Hipple and Councillor Pelkman. Discussion on the minutes? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Moving to item 5, communications. We have 2 tonight. There is 5.1, letter to council from Tri-Township Arena Board, and 5.2, the 2022 Lower Thames preliminary levy and budget. And CEO Trinquilli.
I just wanted to pause for a moment, Mr. Chair, and highlight the letter from the Tri-Township Arena contains a request for council to consider. So I would just ask you to consider that and provide some direction to staff.
Okay, well, should we do that one maybe separate perhaps, or?
You could, if there are members that wish to speak to the Lower Thames preliminary budget, you could handle those two items individually if you wish.
Okay, so let's go with the first one, the letter from the Tri-Township Arena. Any comments from council on that one? Councillor Cowan, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think we sent that letter to the two municipalities as a heads up that that the board had applied to the Trillium Foundation. But I think in the long run, that request can be implemented in our budget process, which we will Director Dakin's hands by January 10th or 12th. Obviously, that will be part of the budget process, whether we need to deal with that tonight, or whether we deal with it at budget time. I'm not sure, Fred. I mean, it is a request, but it was more of a heads up and will be in our budget process. So I don't know, your direction.
CEO Tranquilli?
I think that's certainly helpful. And I know Councillor Flagel's on the board as well, subject to his thoughts. If that's the general consensus of the board members, then perhaps you may wish to refer that letter to the 2022 budget process, and that request will then be considered in due course with the balance of the Tri-Township budget. But otherwise, if you want to give direction specifically with respect to that request tonight, you could do that as well.
Councillor Flagel, did you have any comments?
No, I would just concur with what Councillor Cowan has said. It was more just for information. My understanding is that this grant, any awarded grants will be communicated prior to the end of the year. So that would be timely in terms of our budget process, as long as they maintain that, but that's their published expectations. So we would know clearer then what the outcome might be and what our requests might be as well. So I would agree with Councillor Cowan. It's more for information to be directed for budget considerations.
Is that generally council's wishes? Maybe perhaps move motion. Councillor Kennis.
My question, I guess, more on the urgency of the matter. I mean, it makes it sounds like if the roof is leaking, is that cause any life safety issues, I guess, in the arena, and if so, does it need to be taken care of more quickly? So,
Councillor Cowan.
If I can comment on that, it will be springtime operation. It will lead to difficulties if it's not tended to, but you just can't work with that roof in the wintertime. So it would be a springtime operation to improve on the roof surface.
Any other comments? Councillor Hippel.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So is this something that if we, so we as council moving forward, we would just put this into, kind of push this into January? Do we need to say yay, like, I mean, obviously I would be in, I would agree that this is something that we should be doing. But if this is going to our budget, do we need to make any of those comments on that? Or do we just have to make a motion saying that we're going to put this into the hands of Director Dakin for the 2022 budget? How does that work? I was just questioning how that works.
CEO Tranquilli, please.
I was of the same view as Councillor Kennis in that there seemed to be some urgency, which is why I suggested the council might want to consider it tonight. But it would be sufficient if that's council's wish to refer it to the 2022 budget exercise. So you could invite, Mr. Chair, a motion to receive the letter and refer to the 2022 budget exercise. And I think if I'm hearing from the members on the board correctly, that would be acceptable to them in the form of sort of a heads up, a flag that the roof needs some work, and we want to make sure we include some money in that budget. And I don't know if you can see, Mr. Chair, but Councillor Baker has had her hand up, and perhaps she's not popping up on your view.
Yeah, that's the problem. She's on my second screen. Sorry, Councillor Baker.
Thank you. I thought I was going to have to stand on my head to get recognized. So I'm glad I didn't have to do that because I don't think I can. But anyway, most of my questions have been answered in the process because I had my hand up really early. But the only other one, I was concerned about the urgency, but the only other question I guess I had was, are there any concerns that the estimate for the roof repairs will end up being, substantially more if we delay the repairs for several months? Does anybody on the board have any input? Thank you.
Does anyone know the answer for Councillor Baker's question?
Councillor Flagel has his hand up. I think he's out of your view as well.
I'm hiding in the shadows. I think, Councillor Baker, that is a good point. My recollection is that the quotes were good to the end of the year in terms of a commitment, now that I sit here thinking about it. So there is a potential that that cost could increase. It's guaranteed, the work will not be performed, as Councillor Cowan said, until next year. But I do believe that the preferred bidder has guaranteed the cost for that project through the end of the year. And I don't know that there's a guarantee that it would be at that level in 2022 if not committed to. So in recollection, perhaps you are correct that it should be determined tonight, perhaps, considering it's likely our budget won't be approved until, I can't remember what it said, February, I think I have in my head. But so that is a consideration.
Councillor Pelkman.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. If I may ask a question to Director of Finance as to the position of our 2021 budget versus current operating. We could afford to make that decision tonight with pretty confident knowledge that that would not put us into a deficit situation.
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Pelkman, the 10.5, I think it was, that was requested by the Tri-Township Board would be it could be absorbed in the 2021 budget at this time. So if we needed to do it now, that'd be fine.
Councillor Pelkman, follow up.
Yes, then I would make the motion that we approve the request so that the Tri-Township Arena Board can move forward with their plans.
Councillor Brennan, are you seconding that motion?
I'll second to get it on the floor, then I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Would that motion, Councillor Pelkman, be contingent upon the funding of the $60,000 being successfully received? So our funding of the 10.5 would be contingent upon the other money being received by the Tri-Township Board.
Councillor Pelkman?
Yes, that would be correct, because if we don't get the funding, then we're going to be looking at a whole different question.
Everyone's clear on that one? Any further discussion?
Should we include that in the motion?
It should be, yes, I would think so. Councillor Brennan?
I would make that friendly amendment.
Okay.
If I'm allowed. So.
Agreeable with Councillor Pelkman? Okay, great.
Yes, I agree with that.
Thank you.
So is there any further discussion? I'll try to flip screens here back and forth. Looks like it's all quiet, so Oh, Councillor Kennis, sorry.
So can I get clarification of what the motion is then that we're voting on?
Councillor Pearlman, you want to take a shot at it?
Yep, so that would be the request as it's written, given that we're successful in the funding from, where was it coming from again? Ontario Trillium Foundation.
Does it clarify for you, Councillor Kennis? You're okay?
Yeah, so we're doing the 10 for providing Trillium funding comes through, and the Chippewas put in their 15%. But if they don't, then we come back to the table, basically. Is that what we're saying?
That's my understanding. I think I see a lot of nodding heads, so I think that's correct. Everybody's good? I'll ask the question, and anyone opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. So that deals with the first letter. The second letter, the 5.2, the Lower Thames preliminary levy and budget. Do you want to discuss that one as well? Are we okay just to receive the communications for information? We get a motion on the second one then, please. Councillor Brennan, Councillor Hippel for the discussions. Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 6 is unfinished business. We have none tonight. Item 7, reports from departments. And up first is the Building Planning and Waste Management. Councillor Pelkman is the chair of that department. First off, we have 7.11, subdivision agreement, file number 39D SC 2001, Cirrus Developments Limited, Timberview Trail, Mount Bridges. Who is anyone speaking to this one? Jennifer Huff? Thanks, Jennifer. Come back, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will share my screen briefly. So to council and the members of the public, this report tonight is recommending that council enter into a subdivision agreement with Cirrus Developments. This is for a development in Mount Bridges. It's a site that's about 10 acres in size, located at the southwest corner of Queen Street and Glendon Drive. It proposes 20 lots for singles, 8 lots for 16 semi-detached units, and a block for townhouses. This land has been subject to a rezoning in front of council. The County of Middlesex has issued a draft approval of this plan of subdivision in June of 2022. And the developer has worked to satisfy a number of the conditions of draft plan approval, one of which is that he enter into a subdivision agreement with the municipality. So we have worked with him as well as internal, as well as the municipal solicitor. So we have a draft, sorry, not a draft, we have the agreement that's signed by Cirrus Developments. We have a roadworks permit, letter of credit, insurance, as well as having the agreement that's before you tonight for review and consideration of approval. The engineering plans are in the final iterations, so we expect an engineering approval for that site very shortly. So accordingly, staff are recommending that council enter into a subdivision agreement with Cirrus Developments. Thank you, and available for any questions.
Okay, once we get our screens cleared off there, I can see if there's any hands up. Any questions by council? Councillor Cowan first.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, to Jennifer, or maybe even Jake. I think I read a piece in there about the rebuilding or rehabbing of Queen Street as part of the process. So I'm thinking in terms of this project plus the townhouse project that's ongoing there. With the rehabbing or remaking of Queen Street, would we also look at the flooding issue on the street in the big rains where the catch basin is not taking the water off of Lion Parks Drive and the corner of Queen Street? So if we are looking at that roadway to remake or rehab, I'd like to have that drainage issue looked at the same time. There's Jake.
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor Richards, to Councillor Cowan. So through our Timberview subdivision that we're doing, the Lipset drain is actually the outlet for the Queen Street and Lions Park gate there. So that is going to be upgraded with a culvert on Rougham Road. It's proposed for next spring. So that is in the works.
Great news. Any other comments or questions by council? Councilor Brennan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I guess this question will be to our Director of Building and Planning through you. In looking at the aerial photograph, I see that there is a block of land that runs parallel to Glendon Drive that runs across the backyards of the houses that face on Glendon Drive. Is this the area that's proposed for the townhouse building block that not to exceed 25 units?
Yes, it is.
It is. Could I ask, what's the depth of that lot? I'm just taking a look at it on an aerial. I just don't, it seems to be, maybe the other lots are rather deep. I understand that, but I'm just wondering how deep is that lot? Are those lots from the back lot line towards the road? Like, I'm just wondering how narrow that is. It looks a bit narrow. I'm just for my information, I just don't want to have this come back and bite us later.
Yeah, so I am scrambling to get the actual plan of subdivision, but I can tell you that as part of the zone change application, we did have to receive building envelopes for the townhouse block and ensure that it met the requirements in terms of coverage and rear yard setbacks. So we have reviewed that block to ensure that there was adequate space in those blocks for the townhouse units.
Thank you. And just to follow up through the Deputy Mayor, and that would include areas, and we always get into this for parking and snow removal and visitor parking and all of those things. I'm just saying that I don't actually see a site plan for that block at the moment. So I just want to get some information. I know there's 2 steps in the process, but I'm just asking the questions now.
No, I appreciate it. Through Deputy Mayor. So certainly we will receive a further site plan application in the future to map out those specific details of the parking and the snow storage on that particular block.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from council? Hearing none, then I would ask to have a motion that the recommendation is council enter into a subdivision agreement with Cirrus Developments Limited regarding Timberview Trail subdivision, file number 39T SC 2001. Looking for a mover and seconder. Councillor Cowan moves. Councillor Palkman seconds. Further discussion. All anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 7.1.2 Saxonville Estates Phase 5 Assumption. Jennifer, I think you're still up.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Pretty busy night tonight.
Right. I will again share my screen just to provide some context on the members of public. So this particular report is in response to a request for assumption of Phase 5 Saxonville Estates. This is south of Metcalfe Street, west of Victoria Street in Strathroy. The subdivision has progressed in phases. Council will know that this is a subdivision that has been ongoing for a number of years. This particular phase that is being subject to an assumption request was originally approved back in 2012. It includes 68 lots for singles, a number of roads, blocks, and woodlands. The assumption request has come in. Southside, who is the developer owner of this particular subdivision, has worked with municipality to provide us with all of the information, videos, as-built, etc., that we require in order to consider an assumption. We have reviewed, as well as our consulting engineers have reviewed all of this material. Engineering and public works staff have worked quite closely to undertake a fulsome review of this assumption request and are satisfied with all the material that have been provided to date. And so I can make the recommendation to council at this time that they have satisfied the requirements of an assumption request, and that I'm recommending to council that they move forward with a bylaw that would assume the lands in this particular phase of subdivision.
Thank you, Jennifer. Questions from council? Councilor Brennan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Once again, through the Deputy Mayor to the Director of Building and Planning. Over the last couple of years, I've responded to some ratepayer concerns regarding encroachment in the woodlands that border this area that we're assuming. There had been a great deal of people, some people who were backing onto it had been cutting down trees in the woodland area beyond the area of their property line. They'd been putting in gates, they'd been putting in buildings, fire pits, and some people were quite upset that the trail that goes back there that the public kind of uses for recreational purposes was being degraded, and basically the issue of public property being used for private people's purposes was becoming an issue. So I just don't know where that went, and if those issues have been settled, if the individuals who were encroaching have been spoken to, if they have removed any structures and have been advised that they are no longer to be planting trees in that area, cutting trees in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Through Deputy Mayor Richards to Councillor Brennan. So yes, building and bylaw enforcement staff, as well as community services staff, have been involved in the encroachment issue into the woodlands that are essentially our woodlands. And so even through the developer, there has been notices to the landowners who were identified as being encroaching upon because this is a good opportunity for us to deal with this prior to assumption, to identify and advise those homeowners that those structures need to be removed, pulled back, won't be permitted in the future. And so that has been looked after. We have had some conversations. There's some things that did require to be removed, other things that we were okay with staying as is because they were, and as long as the homeowner understood that they were to be left to naturalize, that they weren't to do any more plantings, and that was understood and accepted by those homeowners. I will note also on just the trail system in there, the municipality itself, we went in there, we did an assessment of the woodlands to identify if there was any hazardous trees in the area and did remove those to ensure that it was safe for those that chose to use that trail system. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
Follow up, Councilor Brennan.
Yes, the follow-up would be, have we identified any access points to the woodland? I know there were issues by some homeowners about where people were accessing the woods. And I'm just wondering if we have identified where people can access those woods so that they're not causing conflicts with private landowners.
Yeah, through Deputy Mayor Richards to Councillor Brennan. So that actually is going to be part of our Trails Master Plan exercise, is identifying some of these woodlands as being on municipal trail systems and identifying where the official trailheads will be, providing adequate signage, and directing people to access them in an appropriate location. So that's something that we continue now that it is officially our woodlands and trail system.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any further questions by council? Councillor Baker.
Thank you. Yes, I just have a question through the Deputy Mayor to the Director. There is one section of sidewalk that's not complete yet on Ashby Crescent. It's because the one building lot is still in process of being completed. I'm assuming that the developer will take care of that once the driveway is finished and the lot is complete.
Yes, through Deputy Mayor Richards to Councillor Baker. So there are a few items that are left because there is a few lots that are not developed. Under the assumption process, we have 1 year of warranty that all of these remaining last works will be required to be completed. And essentially all of the provisions in the agreement remain subject. The developer remains subject to ensure that their compliance. We maintain a certain amount of security to ensure their compliance. And so we work closely with them to make sure that the last I's are dotted and T's are crossed during this warranty period.
Anyone else from council for questions? Hearing none, and I do have a recommendation in front of me that report BBP 2021.86 be received for information and that the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for consideration of adoption. I'll be looking for a mover and seconder. Councillor Hippel, Councillor Pelkman. For the discussion, anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. And 7.1.3, a great news story. Jennifer, I think you're still up.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, council members, public. This last report that I have on tonight has to do with making a recommendation that council would enter into a site plan agreement for the development of industrial lands in our Molnar Industrial Park. So this property is located on the southwest corner of Wright and Adair Boulevard. It is addressed as 707 Adair Boulevard, and this was one of our properties that we have recently sold to Goss Global for development of an industrial manufacturing facility. And I will just quickly share my screen for the benefit of those watching from home. This is a site plan that proposes about a 24,000 square foot facility as just phase one of their ultimate building plans for the site. I can tell you that CAO Fred Trank been instrumental in bringing this deal forward with helping get through the site plan approval process. So we're pleased to put it before council. Goss Global is related to the automotive industry, aftermarket materials for the automotive industry. They're anticipating 15 to 20 new jobs with this facility, and then more to come as the additional phases come on stream. And they have worked quite well with ourselves internally, as well as our consulting engineer, to develop a site plan that meets both engineering and zoning requirements. And so staff are now in a position to make a recommendation that we enter into the agreement. The agreement has been drafted, reviewed, and signed by Goss Global and is on tonight's agenda. And I'll leave it with that. If anyone has any questions, happy to help.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions? Certainly a good news story. Anyone in council have any questions? Then I do have a recommendation that the site plan control application be approved for construction of a new industrial building at 707 Adair Boulevard, and that council approve the bylaw entering into a site plan agreement with Goss Global Realty Corporation. I would be looking for a mover and seconder. Councillor Kennis, Councillor Brennan. Further discussion by anyone in council? Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on now to 7.2, Community Services. Councillor Marie Baker chairs this department. And we have there's the report coming on your table there. Rob Wilborn is the department head. Rob, did you want to touch this one?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Richards. Just Council, the report in front of you this evening is just our typical CDAC report that comes after our regular meetings. This past month, we had two meetings, actually a meeting on November 2nd, which was a special meeting, a meeting called by the chair, and then a meeting on the 23rd. The meeting on the 2nd of November was specifically to do with the recreation facility infrastructure renewal strategy, specifically with relation to the arena and Mount Bridges. The committee discussed that evening the formation of two committees, which are recommended this evening to council, one being a building committee and the other committee being a fundraising committee. The committee debated the composition of those two committees, and it was decided that the CDAC members who are already been vetted and approved by council sit on those committees, divided up equally amongst the wards. So the CDAC committee, if you're not aware, has the same number of members from Mount Bridges, Ward 2, as we do from Ward 1, Strathroy. So we divided up those committee members equally. The council representation, which ultimately would be decided by council, the advisory committee did make a recommendation on that formation as well. However, with the understanding that ultimately council would make those decisions. And then we had a meeting on the 23rd of November, which was our regular meeting. Lots of items on the agenda. The only one that's really a couple that made the report, again, the recreation facility infrastructure renewal strategy. Out of the creation of those two committees in November 2nd, staff worked on creating a couple terms of references for each committee, one, again, building committee and one for the fundraising committee. Again, those are attached. The other item that came up that was identified in this report is the museum curator, Lindsay Kernahan, has resigned from to take a new position within the city, within London, in totally leaving the field of museums and culture completely behind. So we will be in the future looking for a new curator, supervisor, or some new form of leadership within that operation as well. So I'm here for any questions.
Questions from council? Councillor Hippel.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Director Liborn. I know you touched on it really quickly, and so I just wanted to, I guess, question, but yet, comment on it. That when we're looking at the building committee roles and the fundraising committee roles with Ward 2, even though that there are 2 positions on the fundraising committee for Ward 2 and only 1 on the building committee, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that it is 2 on one, 1 on the other. We can swap that around, correct? Just as the building committee would be, it would be effective to have it could be very effective to have 2 Ward 2 on that, or if they so chose. I just wanted to make sure that that was thrown out there because I did have a couple questions on that. So yes, go ahead.
through the chair to Councillor Hippel, absolutely. Council can amend the recommendations if they so fit. At the CDAC meeting, there was some conversation around this, and knowing that the deputy mayor is elected at large, so again representing both Ward 1 and Ward 2, that would suffice that concern, or you can switch it around. It's, again, that's up to council. The advisory committee made its recommendation, but again, council can amend that recommendation if they so choose.
Anyone else from council with questions? Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to the director. The mayor is automatically a member of any committee, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Brennan, absolutely, she would be an ex officio of both committees.
So in effect, the mayor would be a member of each, and that's just an interesting thing just to throw in there. She may or may not be at a meeting, but she is an ex officio member and has full voting rights, correct?
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you. Through the deputy mayor, well, it's not really a question. I have a comment and then I'll have a question, I guess. But it's not really to anybody specifically. Comment is that I have to say, I just want to share with council and the public that's listening that when we thought about who best to participate on these committees, who'd already been vetted through the municipal process and who had experience with community development and recreation services, we felt that the CDAC team we have on the committee would be best suited to ask if they would be willing to participate. To my surprise, not surprise, to my pleasure, They wholeheartedly embraced this project and stepped up to the roles like immediately. There was no arguing about who was going where. They just said, I would like to be on this committee, and it all fell into place beautifully. And given that, you know, we prefaced the whole conversation with them that this was going to be a big project and quite a time commitment, they didn't back down at all. So I was quite happy with the members of the committee and their willingness to participate in this rather large project we have in front of us. So that being said, I guess I'll put the question to council tonight as to how we want to deal with filling the ward positions, the council positions on the committees. Do we want to take it away tonight for some thought and bring it back for discussion at our next meeting, or do we want to discuss it, put it on the floor right tonight, and people just express their preferences? Just putting that out there to see what the preference of council is, if you would prefer to just give it some thought. There is a bit of urgency because I feel that the committee is ready to get started in this work in the new year. So we shouldn't drag our feet deciding who goes where. But that being said, you're not being necessarily put on the spot right tonight just to say, oh, this is what I want to do. Thank you.
Councillor Peckman, please.
Yes, and thank you to the committee for doing all that work and laying out the framework of how this is going to proceed, because that's a whole job in of itself. My own preference for the council positions would be that we take the 2 weeks until the next meeting, and maybe I'll put our thoughts in about where we would like to be, and then have a suggestion put forward after everybody's input has been taken.
Anyone else? Councillor Hippel.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I actually was, knowing that we did have a chance to kind of look through this, I guess I was kind of hoping that we would perhaps look at it tonight so that we would be ready to go a little bit quicker. That is just my thought. I would love to be able to make some of those decisions tonight, but I do understand if other council members would prefer to have time. I'm ready to go tonight. Big surprise, I'm sure. But that's just my thought on it. Anyways.
Thank you, Councillor Hippel. Councillor Kennis.
I guess I'm in the same boat. So if I my preference and would like me on a committee, I would prefer to be on the fundraising committee. So.
Did you want to go around the horn perhaps as councillors and express your thoughts? Or should we wait? CEO Tranquilli, please.
I think, Mr. Chair, if I can help, there's really two issues for the council to discuss, and Councillor Hippel touched on one of them earlier, which is the composition of the committees. So if the council is content with the composition as CDAC has recommended, then you're probably in a good spot to canvass members to see where they would like to serve. And then that will let the council know where there is room and where the spots are filled. So if I can be of any assistance, I would encourage the council to focus on the composition. And if everyone is agreed on what CDAC has recommended, then I think you'll be in a better spot to determine where members may wish to serve.
Very good point. So how does everyone feel about the way, as Rob has presented, what the recommendations were? Is everyone comfortable with that? Switch screens here to have a look. Councillor Flagel.
Yes and no. Yes, it makes sense to me to a certain degree. I guess I have a question and then a comment. The question with regards to the committee structure, all members of CDAC are we're obviously vetted, but for a certain term, which ends on October 2022. So how does that impact this process in terms of selecting them as members of these committees? Is it independent of CDAC, or is it part of CDAC? Because obviously that structure will change. So that I guess that goes for council as well. So I'm not clear on how that works. For example, myself, I've noted that it's not my intent at this stage to run again. Would this mean that a future council member would take my spot on this committee when the time presents itself?
CO Tranquility, please.
I would, through you, Mr. Chair, say that the election will certainly require reappointments to all committees, including those that involve current members of CDAC. We don't know that the members of CDAC will put their names forward for reappointment in the term 2022 forward. So my response would be that all of these appointments will have to be revisited following the next election.
Councillor Hippel?
So in a situation like that, should we be considering, I'm probably going to step on something that one of our other council members is going to bring up, but it seems like the perfect time to ask this. Would it be smart then as a municipality to be maybe having a representative from user groups within the municipality to be a part of this? Because then and I don't mean let's add 100 people, I don't even mean let's add 10. I mean, specific user groups, would that make sense to have to appoint them to a committee as well? Because, and I mean, I see you shaking your head, Council Pumpkin, but I guess what I'm thinking is then they wouldn't change. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if we were to, and I'm just going to use this as an example, I'm not saying that this is what would happen, but let's use the Lions. So could we appoint one person from the Lions, a representative from the Lions being on the fundraising group, and not, I guess, that they would stay the same? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Tell me what your thoughts are on that. I guess I'm curious.
CO Tranquility.
I think regardless of the group being represented, they would still need to be reappointed at the conclusion of this council term. I am aware that, and perhaps Councillor Baker has some insight, I am aware that a discussion of this nature did take place at CDAC, and that those issues were discussed, debated, canvassed, and that the composition that CDAC has presented essentially does not take that path. And for reasons Councillor Baker may wish to share, but if that's the direction that you feel you want to go in, Councillor Hippel, then that would not be consistent with the CDAC recommendation. And that's part of why I think the council should have this discussion first.
Councillor Baker?
Thank you. Yeah, happy to share part of the conversation that happened at CDAC in composition of this, and I believe Councillor Hippel was there for the discussion. But essentially, CDAC felt that, and the committee as a whole felt that they were a wide spectrum of interests across both communities and not representing special interests. And so when Councillor Hippel referenced user groups, there's a reason why the committee felt the recommendation should not include representatives of user groups on these committees because they have special niche interests. And I wholeheartedly concur with the committee's recommendation in that area, that these members that are forming the committee, as well as our representatives from council, have the widest broadest range of interests that we will bring to the table rather than representing specifics. So for that reason, that's one of the reasons why the committee went this way. The committee also recognizes in the terms of reference many other outside groups and forces that will be brought into play by each committee, by the fundraising committee, by the building committee, that will be called upon to participate and share in the experience. So just because they're not named members of the committee does not mean that we won't be calling on their expertise or their knowledge and their ability to help us, because this project will involve many people in the community's help. So I hope that satisfies some of what Councillor Hippel brought forward, and the CAO is correct. Like, these appointments only last as long as they last. We only last as long as we last. So everything will change come, next a year from now, and there'll be some consistency on the committee, but hopefully we'll have done by that time a good portion of the legwork, and any newcomers can just slide in and finish it off. So that's my hope. Thank you.
Councillor Flagel.
I guess not surprisingly, my recollection of that discussion is slightly different, only because I found that it was a recommendation brought forth that people bought into, and then in terms of into being part of the process. I personally think that expanding the committee slightly would not be to the detriment of the process. I agree we vetted these folks, but not for this process, which is a pretty intense undertaking from what I've seen in other communities. So I would, especially the building side, there is part of me that thinks this is a lot to ask of those folks in the size it is. I don't call it special interest when every service group in the community and almost every user group has decided to try and work together to further the cause. So I wouldn't see it being to the detriment to look at asking that group to recommend, or doing the community at large, a couple of positions added to the fundraising committee, so that everyone's working together in this process. But that discussion, to my recollection, was that it would become a council discussion, which we're having right now. As far as the membership on the committees as council members, I would like to proceed. I feel I've had lots of time to think about where I might want to be, knowing this was going to come. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is a question. Let's say my preference is to be on fundraising, but each committee will still report back to council, would be my understanding, and we would have input to that process. So while we wouldn't directly be involved in those meetings and everything else, I still think our roles would include the potential to work with the designates on each committee from this council. So, but if we don't choose soon, I would hope that we could have these decisions made tonight, perhaps identify a schedule in the for the new year, and then get rolling in the new year here, as there's lots of work to be done, and obviously tight timelines to get this process going. So to summarize, I personally think we should entertain expanding the committee slightly from what was recommended by CDAC. And I think we should try tonight, if we approve whatever the makeup's going to be, to make a commitment ourselves to where we want to be in this process, so we can get moving.
Councillor Pelkman.
Yes, so if I may, the reason why I was shaking my head at user groups is my experience in other building projects has been that if one user group is included over another user group that isn't, and then you include them as voting people of the committee, decisions could be made that ends up costing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Because my recollection of Gemini is every time we expanded the width of the building by a foot. It added about, I don't know, was it $900,000, Deputy Mayor Richards? Can you remember that? It was a significant amount.
It was up there
anyways,
anyways, yeah.
right? So even adding storage space, because one user group wants larger storage space, could be a significant dollar decision. And while I agree with Councillor Baker that the user groups can be certainly brought in to provide recommendations on what they could see to be improved or what their needs are to make it user friendly, I don't think it's wise to have them at the point of the decision making. But as far as the making decision, if everybody knows where they're going or where they wish to go, I was just a little bit worried what we would do if there was 8 people that wanted on one committee, and then we'd have to try and figure things out. That was my reasoning for delaying it, but I'm okay. I know which committee I want to sit on. So,
Well, just a little bit of history that I can remember, Steve, is for the Gemini back in 1999 or 2000 when it opened. Our building committee wasn't a huge group; it was 8 to 10 people, and I might be wrong on that. You have to look at the plaque and see how many names are on there. But there was about 8 or 10. But there was lots of groups below us that did committee work, but specific committee work. And then our group made a decision back to council, and that's how it kind of went down the pipe. But it was like 8 or 10. I could be wrong on that. And I think the finance was same way. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just looking over the terms of reference for the building committee, it says advise and assist the municipality in providing input and suggestions with regard to a future ice arena and multi-purpose space within the community of Mount Bridges. I think we should, caution everybody in the audience tonight that there has been no decision as yet to build any such hub or any such arena, and that any decisions or recommendations made by these committees would come back to a future council that would decide in the future whether or not this was going to happen. It doesn't mean I'm against this, but I kind of get in the cart and the horse situation here. Having a fundraising committee formed for a building, which is yet we don't know the design of, that will have to be recommended or approved by a future council. I just don't want us to start collecting a bunch of money for something that we haven't yet approved or hasn't been approved by a future council. Is it the mandate of this group to make go out and get a design, and a design may or may not have an arena in it, and that's going to come back to council for approval? Because our council said that we would not go from 4 ice pads to 3 ice pads, but our council has not made a decision about where an ice pad would go if we built another one. I mean, there's a lot of talk in the community about what council has approved and hasn't approved, but we have not approved building an arena in Mount Bridges yet. And that will probably be a future committee that does that. And I just worry about the cart and the horse here and what people are thinking when we put these committees out there. Because if we have a committee that is raising money for an ice arena in Mount Bridges that has yet to be approved by a future council, I don't know what a future council is going to do. And also, if we have a building committee that is doing a recreation hub that has an arena in it, that's going to come back to council for a future council for approval. So I'm not against the project. I just worry about process and steps and making sure that we're not proceeding on the assumption that the decision has already been made.
Councillor Hippel.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm a little confused. So I was under the assumption that when we had the last meeting that we had about this, that we were moving forward, hence why this came to CDAC as to facilitate what we were going to be bringing forward to council as what type of a building and arena we were going to be bringing. And you're talking about future council, but would this not be our council? We're still council until, I don't know, October 2022. So I feel like, I'm sorry, someone needs to correct me in here somewhere, but I'm pretty sure we did say that we were going to build an arena. So someone help me. And, okay, so then what are we doing?
Counselor Pelkman again.
I think we'd have to look at the wording of the motion, but I believe the wording of the motion was that we were to give direction to staff to start working on a proposed facility with an ice pad in Mount Bridges. I think it was fairly specific.
Counselor Brennan.
Agreed, but we never made a decision to build it yet in Mount Bridges. I just want people to understand that the decision to build in Mount Bridges has not been approved by council. We've approved a study committee to take a look at it and make recommendations, and that's going to come back to council. I don't think it's made a decision to build an arena in Mount Bridges. Not yet.
But, okay, if I could though, if we don't do some of the legwork first and get ideas, pricings, you can't decide anything really.
Oh, I'm not arguing that.
It's like the cart before the horse you mentioned, John. You got to have something before the other, yeah.
I understand it completely. I'm just trying to have people, public perception. We've okayed building committees, but we have not made a decision to build.
I think I seen Councillor Cowan's hand up.
Yeah, I guess I'm slightly in disagreement with Councillor Brennan because I thought, much like Councillor Pelkman, that we had approved the decision to move forward at a facility in Mount Bridges replacing the Tri-Township. I guess we need some clarification on that. But moving forward, I had two thoughts. Number one, I would position myself on the build committee if possible. And number two, to pick up on some of the discussion from Councillor Baker and Flego. I agree with the makeup of committees and the numbers, but that does not preclude the committee from liaising with maybe all the music groups in Mount Bridges. And I think, Rob, for clarification, was there not something said somewhere along the line that that in terms of the fundraising, if the municipality was doing it, there was implications on people getting donation receipts versus particular groups trying to fundraise where they would not. Can you give some clarification on that?
Through the chair to Councillor Cowan, that is correct. If we have a fundraising committee and fundraising dollars were to come into the municipality, then the municipality has the ability to issue charitable tax receipts. Now, I don't know if there are other groups. There may be service groups that may be registered and have that capacity. I'm not aware of that. What I am aware is when the municipality, we do have the ability to issue charitable tax receipts. And we are doing so with the skate park, the All Wheels Park that the Rotary Club is assisting with.
I think it's in Councillor Flego next.
Well, if there's confusion, I definitely think we need to sort it out ASAP. So the motion was council instructs staff to work with a building committee, which we're discussing tonight, to begin planning for a new indoor ice pad in Mount Bridges, and that this plan incorporate a multi-purpose facility if financially feasible. If financially feasible, to my understanding, is the multi-purpose component, not the arena. I think it's been fairly widely reported and understood and I guess we can throw it on the table here, that there is a commitment to an ice pad, AKA an arena for Mount Bridges. So anything other than that is not my understanding. So we need to clarify that shortly. But that's the motion that was passed back in September, I guess it was.
Councillor Brennan.
I agree that, I think I'm unmuted. I agree
Yeah,
that
you
was to begin planning for. Does that constitute council has agreed to build? And I put the question through the deputy mayor to our CAO, because he's a lawyer, or whatever we're doing here. But you know, constituting a committee planning to look at or to design, I'm not sure if that's the same thing as having said yes, we are going to build this thing. And I'm just want to get it clear before we proceed.
Councillor or CEO Tranquilli, please.
If Councillor Flagel has read the motion correctly, I'd like to hear it again if I could. I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately.
Councillor Flagel, go ahead.
Yeah, so this was Monday, September 27th. I'm referencing the Recreation Facility Infrastructure Renewal Committee minutes. Moved by Councillor Baker, seconded by Councillor Hippel, that council instructs staff to work with a building committee to begin planning for a new indoor ice pad in Mount Bridges, and that this plan incorporate a multi-purpose facility if financially feasible.
I would say the operative words are begin planning, which I think is what's underway right now. So I don't hear a firm commitment beyond that council will direct staff to begin planning. And I think that's what we're doing now.
Councillor Peltman.
Yes, I think we're dealing with a little bit of word semantics here. And I think that we need to move forward with the topic of discussion, which is the committee makeup. And I haven't heard anybody say that they're drastically opposed to the committee makeup as it's been presented. So I would move that that we agree with the committee makeup as presented, and then proceed with us as councillors deciding where we would like to sit.
Would you do that tonight, Steve, or are you just moving the motion of the committees?
First step is moving the motion for the committees. Then I think we can go ahead and decide.
Okay. Seconder for that motion, Councillor Hippel. Did you want us to discuss it too, Councillor Hippel?
No, that's fine as long as, and I did agree with and saying, you know, obviously we're going to be reaching out and talking to the people in the community. But I want to second that motion, and I also want to be on the building committee along with Councillor Cowan. So hopefully you can kind of maneuver it so we can have two Ward 2 councillors on the building committee, if you're okay with that.
Anyone else comments? I don't see any more hands up. So we do have a motion.
Councillor
Sorry,
Brennan,
Councillor Brennan.
Councillor Brennan has his hand.
Got you, John. Just last minute there. Go ahead, John.
I have no problem supporting the motion and constituting the committees, which I think we should do. But I do think that at some point we're going to have to have a clear motion made by council as opposed to a recommendation from infrastructure committee that we are in fact either committing, like are we merely planning, or have we already committed that this is a thing that we are going to build? And I think that's where I get unclear as terms of what we actually agreed to do at the infrastructure committee meeting and what's been approved by council. Planning, begin planning, absolutely. Are we actually going to build this thing? I don't think council has made a firm motion and a decision on that. Not to my ears.
Councillor Kennis.
I've kind of tried to stay out of the fray here, but as I recall, it goes back to the cost, right? We don't have an idea of what this is going to cost and how much money is involved, and how much money can be raised in grants, and how much money we're going to have to come up with. And so, with ourselves. So I think, we need to begin the planning process to get an idea of what a facility like this is going to cost. And then we're going to have to make a decision, what's the maximum amount of money that we want to spend on a facility like this. So that decision obviously has not been made yet. And so I think we need to move forward and establish the plans and the numbers. So.
And being on the Gemini project, it does take time. You're not going to do this overnight, I can tell you. You got some weeks and weeks of planning just to get the work done that you want to get done. So again, it's all good, but it's not going to happen overnight. Anyone else for comments? I see nothing on page 1. Councillor Baker. Yeah. You're on page 2, Councillor Baker.
Sorry to be on page 2. Yes, I just I think what we have proposed tonight, and I'm not sure why this is being called into question at all. What we're proposing tonight is exactly what the recommendation was, which was to begin planning, to get a building committee together to begin planning. But that also involves a fundraising component too, because until we find out from the building committee exactly how much a facility is going to cost, even if we get some rough numbers early on, and we know how much fundraising can be done by us, by grants, by the community, then, we put those all together and that's when we get the go ahead. But what's also been called into question is whether the location of the facility, and I thought that was pretty clear in the motion that it said Mount Bridges. So I'm just putting that out there because I don't think there's any question in my mind. If there's question in other councillors' minds, maybe we should clear that up. But there's no question in my mind where if we build this facility, where it will land. I will defer to my fellow councillors. I'm chair of the CDAC committee of council. I'm also chair of the CDAC committee in general, so I can sit on both or either committee. I do have a preference, but I will wait and see where everybody decides where they want to go, and I'll fill in where needed. Thank you.
So I think we did have a motion moved and seconded, did we? I think Steve moved that we accept the minutes as, then we'll get council's input after that. Is that correct, Councillor Peltman? And Councillor Hippel seconded, I believe. CO Tranquilli, please.
I just wanted to clarify, Councillor Hippel made a comment about an additional complement on one of the committees, which is not consistent with Councillor Peltman's motion. So if that's what Councillor Hippel wants, which sounds to me like an adjustment to the composition, the council should clarify that so that we have clear direction.
Councillor Hippel.
Okay, I'm sorry, you guys. I guess I did do that. Okay, so can we just amend, Steve? If you guys are okay with that, I would really like to be a part of the building committee. So if we could possibly put 2 Ward 2 councillors in committee and 1 Ward 2 on the fundraising committee, if you see no problems with that, then I would go ahead with Steve's motion, but just by switching that, if that's possible. If that's okay, if you guys are all right with that.
Councillor Peltman.
This is why I didn't want to pass it tonight, because I think we're going to run into a problem with numbers and then we have to adjust what our committee makeup's going to be.
CO Tranquilli.
So just to be clear, so Councillor Peltman's made a motion, and if there is a wish to amend that motion, then that's what would be necessary to accommodate Councillor Hippel's wish. And if Councillor Peltman is open to an amendment, then the amendment could be considered. Otherwise, the motion that's on the floor is consistent with what CDAC has recommended in terms of composition.
Councillor Peltman.
Maybe perhaps I'll withdraw my motion and we can do a quick canvass of council to see where we all fit, to see if we have to actually make an amendment to the committee makeup.
Other councilors' thoughts on that?
Councillor Flagel as
Councillor Flagel?
Yeah, obviously there's an interest in Ward 2 councillors being part of the building committee, and I can understand that. I would go to the fundraising committee, which there had originally been Ward 2 positions at. So just so you know where I would fall. I guess it's a question of whether we feel the building committee is obviously going to be a challenge. So I have no problem with amending the committee structure to permit that, so that there are Ward 2 councillors on that. Obviously, the deputy mayor has been assigned that in the recommendation. But I'll slide to the fundraising, which would permit Larry and Sandy to be building if council sees it fit.
Further discussion? So if I'm hearing you right, then we're going with Steve's idea, the amended two councils from Ward 2.
what I suggested, we do a quick canvas first to see if the makeup is actually where it needs to be.
Okay. Councillor
So-
CO Tranquilli.
Can I make a suggestion, Mr. Chair? I would recommend that Councillor Pelkman leave his motion on the floor. I don't believe the seconder agreed to withdraw it, and amend Councillor Pelkman's motion to reflect Councillor Hippel's wish. And if that amendment is successful, then you have your composition. If it's not successful, then you have your composition, and you will know where the council stands based on that vote.
Is that good between the two councillors?
Just accept that we don't know how many people want to be in the building committee and we don't know where the numbers fall. We may be way out, who knows?
So then I guess that councillor would have to decline the motion, would they not?
Well, Deputy Mayor, what instead of calling a vote, just do a quick canvas of the council members to see where we're actually at.
Okay, so let's start with Councillor Brennan then.
About my preference for committee?
Yes,
Oh, fundraising.
fundraising, okay. Councillor Pelkman,
Building committee.
Councillor Kennis,
Fundraising.
Councillor Hippel,
Building, please.
Councillor Cowan,
Building, please.
Councillor Baker,
As I said, I would fill in, but looks like building is where I'm gonna go, and that would have been my preference anyway, so.
and Councillor Flagel, I think you said finance, but can reconfirm that?
Yep, correct, fundraising.
So it sounds like a pretty good split, I think. If
Three fundraising, 4 building.
that's a pretty good number. And the mayor's on both at large anyway, so we don't have to worry about that. So she can go to on either committee at any time. Is everyone comfortable with that? So now we could vote on the motion, correct? Okay, and everybody understands where we're at then, are we?
So that would be an amended motion to include two Ward 2
Correct,
candidates on
on the
building.
building committee, yeah. So we're all clear on that, clear as mud? Anyone opposed to that motion? Gotta flip over to the screen too. No, I think we're good. So that passes. Thank you for a good discussion on that. It's very well done. So now I guess after the actual minutes from the CDAC,
I'm
November
sorry,
2nd and
Mr.
November
Chair.
23rd.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, notwithstanding the straw poll that you've done, it may be worthwhile formalizing those appointments by way of a motion. Just so
Good
that,
idea. Yep, certainly. Would somebody like to make those the positions official? Council Hippel, seconder, Councillor Kennis.
so if
Anyone opposed?
I could, just for the record, I have Brennan on finance, Pelkman on building, Kennis on finance, Hippel on building, Cowan on building, Baker on building, and Flagel on fundraising finance.
Everybody's nodding, so it looks good. Yep. So Sandy, did you approve or make the motion to approve that? Did we get a seconder? Well, it was Councillor Kennis. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's passed. Thank you. Now, we're still on the minutes from November 2nd and November 23rd of the CDAC committee. I think we need to approve the other parts of those minutes, I believe. Can we have a mover and seconder? Councillor Hippel and Councillor Baker. Did you have a question, Marie, too, or no? Okay. Anyone opposed to those minutes? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 7.3, Engineering and Public Works. Councillor Cowan is in charge of that department. We have one item tonight, or yes, one item, MS3 upgrades, the tender award. And Director Strauss is here to talk about this one. Go ahead, Jake.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Richards. Through you, this report tonight is for the monitoring station number 3. I'll also refer to it as MS3. Tender award. The project is to replace the existing building structure. With that, has new instrumentation and some safety upgrades as well. I think it's also important for me to highlight the existing building has been identified for replacement due to its structural integrity as recommended by a structural engineer. To further on the new instrumentation, that includes a chlorine analyzer and a flow meter. Upgrades in the building are adding a shower and eye wash station, which does not actually currently exist in the building, and also improving the heating and ventilation. As part of the tender award, the contractor will also be upgrading the safety access to the roof on the Mount Bridges Reservoir near the fire hall. In Mount Bridges, sorry, and then also including some tie-off points for safety matters. So going back to the April 19th council meeting, council approved a technical report for this MS3 station and also directed staff to complete the engineering and tendering of the project. So this tender was publicly advertised on bids and tenders with the closing date of November 19th, and we received 3 qualified bids. Out of the bids received, K&L Construction had the lowest price submitted for $907,187.86, excluding HST. Further, we're also recommending that RV Anderson be awarded the contract admin of the MS3 project in the amount of $41,000, excluding HST. The total cost of the project, including the construction, the contract administration, the contingency, and the HST all combined is $1,008,200. So in the previous report noted on April 19th, council approved $736,500 to be allocated to the project. Obviously, the funding has exceeded that. The additional funding is proposed out of it. The additional funding, sorry, is $271,700, and that would be drawn from the proposed 2022 capital budget.
Thank you, Director Strauss. Any questions on the project? We do Councillor Kennis.
So what's the timeline on this project? Starts next year sometime, or and how long will it take to complete?
I would, I don't want to speak on the timeline because we haven't had a pre-consultation meeting with the contractor yet. But the timeline would be as soon as next year. It would be within the springtime, I would assume.
Further questions from anyone? Hearing none, there is a recommendation. The council received the report EPW 2021-30 regarding upgrades, tender award, and the council award the MS3 contract to K&L Construction in the amount of $907,187.86, excluding HST, and the council award the contract administration for the MS3 project to RV Anderson in the amount of $41,000, excluding HST. We have motion into seconder, please. Councillor Cowan and Councillor Kennis. Further discussion? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 7.4, the Chief Administrator Officer, the mayor's in charge of that one. And it's the hiring report, and I think Doug Payne, our director, will be talking about that one.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good evening, Council. Brief report for you this evening. It's a hiring report, 2 specific hires contained in this report. We have a Senior Development Coordinator and a Roads Heavy Equipment Operator. So a little bit of background, back in October, we did begin recruiting for a senior development coordinator in the building and planning department. Again, kind of caveat to the report earlier in the building fees and what have you, due to the tremendous growth in the municipality, it aided the need for an additional position there. And the public works operator, we had a planned retirement of one of our operators, so the second position replaces that. So I'm happy to say we had, through a recruiting process, we did make an offer of employment for the senior development coordinator to Jake DeRitter. Mr. DeRitter comes to us from the municipality of Middlesex Center, where he performed a very similar role as a development review coordinator there. So we're excited to have him come on board. He has actually started November 29th, so last Monday. He has over 5 years of experience working specifically in the development field. So we really look forward to Mr. DeRitter's skill set bringing to the team. Now, on top of that, the second position, we're happy to announce as well that we made an offer to Lucas Wilson for the roads heavy equipment operator. He comes to us from as a substation in London Fire Equipment, a lot of technical experience, and his niche, I guess, as he told me today, is he's a self-employed arborist, tree cutting and what have you. So we really look forward to that experience that he brings with us, his technical experience, and as an arborist as well. It's important to mention too, Mr. Wilson currently serves as a Strathroy-Caradoc Fire Department as a volunteer firefighter. So he as well started on 29th of November, which was last Monday. Rounding out the report, financial implications, the senior development coordinator position will be funded through building and planning fees. And the roads heavy equipment operator, it's already an existing budgeted position, so that'll be replaced there. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Director Payne tonight?
Thank you.
Seeing none, then we do have a recommendation that report HR 2021-20. It's a hiring report for the senior development coordinator in roads and the heavy equipment operator be received for information. Looking for a mover and seconder. Councillor Pelkman and Councillor Baker. Any further discussions? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, reports from boards and committees. We have 2 tonight, Tri-Township Arena Board minutes from October the 14th and the Strathroy-Caradoc Police Department activity reports, October 2021. Any questions on either of those? Don't see any hands, so can we have a mover to accept the reports, please? Councillor Brennan, Councillor Cowan, anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And now we're moving on to item 9, sorry, consideration of bylaws. CO Tranquilli, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bylaw 6121 is before you for first, second, and third reading, and this is the building bylaw that related to the management of those fees and that Glenn Tunnock presented on at the beginning of the meeting tonight.
We're looking for a mover and seconder for the first bylaw. Council, seconded by Councillor Pelkman. Any further questions? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
Bylaw 6221. Again, Mr. Chair, this is before council for first, second, and third and final reading related to the assumption of that portion of phase 5 of Saxonville Estates.
Looking for a mover and seconder on this item. Councillor Brennan and Councillor Hippel. Discussions? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
And bylaw 6321, Mr. Chair, is again before council for first, second, and third and final reading. And this is the site plan control agreement for Goss Global related to that new employer at 707 Adair Boulevard.
Mover and seconder for this motion, Councillor Cowan and Councillor Baker. Any further questions? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
And finally, also for first, second, and third and final reading is bylaw 6421, which is a subdivision agreement that was reviewed earlier this evening related to timber review.
Mover or seconder for this bylaw? Counselor Pelkman, Counselor Kennis? Discussions? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. There is no new business tonight. County Council report. The county had their inaugural meeting last Thursday, and the new warden for the next year will be Allison Warwick, the mayor of Thames Center. I want to wish her all the best, and Allison so we're looking forward to another year of the county. Inquiries or comments by members. Let's start with Councillor Hippel, please.
Nothing tonight, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Thank you. I just want to say, just want to make mention that today is the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. It was 32 years ago today that 13 women were killed at l'École Polytechnique in Quebec. And this continues to be a day of remembrance. Today I learned in some thoughts that were sent to me by the Women's Rural Resource Center that to this date in Ontario, this year, there have been 58 women who've been killed by femicide, and it's tragic and it's wrong. And so I just want everybody to take a minute and think about those losses this evening, and hope we can do better. And also, on a lighter note, just thank you to everyone, including the municipality and all the volunteers, the emergency services, and everybody involved in bringing together the Winterfest last Friday night at West Middlesex Memorial Center. I took my grandchildren to it. The 8-month-old just kind of hung out, but the 3-year-old absolutely had the time of her life. The food trucks, the people, the train, Santa, the entertainment, the dancers. We have such great talent in our community. It was just a fabulous night. It was packed, and it couldn't have gone better. So, and the amount of people that donated to the toy drive and the food bank to cram a cruiser and a trailer was phenomenal. So thank you to all involved for organizing that. It was a huge success. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Cowan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I go back to a week ago Sunday when we had our first significant phone call, I guess. And I was in Mount Bridges, did a little tour, and actually did Director Strauss on what a great job the work crews had done, particularly on the sidewalks. All the sidewalks by 9:30 that morning were plowed. I saw no uprooted sod or damage along the way, so I was feeling pretty good about that. Thought I should commend our workforce through Director Strauss. However, about an hour later, I got a phone call from a gentleman that wasn't too happy with the sidewalks, that there was still some ice and slush, and why didn't we require citizens to shovel their portion of the sidewalk? And I said at the time I didn't think we had a bylaw that stated that that was a requirement, but I would check. So I emailed Director Strauss, and he informed me today that we don't have a bylaw reflecting that, but he did send me a snippet of the Ontario mandated parameters on roads and sidewalks, which is good. And I'm just wondering if what Director Strauss sent me today, if that might be put on the website for information for people that are wondering about sidewalks and snow shoveling, etc. This gentleman suggested that the sidewalk was such that people were walking on the road instead of the sidewalk, And quite frankly, every time I'm in Mount Bridges, I see people walking on the road, even though the sidewalks are clear. So I don't think that's a big issue. Once again, kudos to the guys in the first significant snowfall for getting the community cleaned up in good fashion.
Thank you, Councilor Cowan. Yeah, they did a great job here in Strathroy as well. It was done really early. It was nice, clean. Everything was good. Councilor Pelkman.
Yes, thank you. I guess first off, hearing that our curator is leaving the museum, I would like to wish Lindsay Kernahan well. She served the municipality well in her efforts and contribution to not only telling our story, but preserving it. It wasn't that long ago that people's confidence in that the museum would look after their artifacts well was a little underwhelming, and she has done a remarkable job at making sure that the professional museum is not in question. I guess I would like to echo some of Councillor Baker's comments, not maybe specifically about women, but over the course of the pandemic, it seems that people feel very free to express their outrage in terms of violence and vile vocabulary. And I just really wish people would take a step back and remember what Canadians are about, that, you know, we should have tolerance and be friendly and neighborly, and to really try and check those emotions of rage and anger. Yes, it's a frustrating time. Is it worth taking your rage out on someone who has no power to change what you would like to be changed? No, I don't believe it is. And thirdly, with it being into the Christmas season, please don't drink and drive. We've seen too many numbers of people being pulled over and being intoxicated while driving. So please, please, please don't drink and drive.
Thank you, Councillor Pelkman. Councillor Flagel.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I echo many of the comments made this evening. I'll just add one more for the season, and that is when you're out shopping, we buy gifts for those people we care about, and we all care about our community. So maybe everyone should consider maybe buying one gift that they'll donate to one of the charities in town that takes care of those people who maybe have had a really rough year, or a cash donation. But I think if we all made room in our hearts for one gift that doesn't go to someone that we know, the community would really benefit. That's my only comment for tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. And last but not least, Councillor Kennis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to give some recognition to the Jaslow people, the Lumens, for the work that they're doing on the old Kenwick property now, which is now, I believe, called the Shops on Sydenham. They're just, making, sprucing the place up, and it looks a whole lot better than it has in years. And my understanding is they're going to continue to do a lot of work on that property. So I think as a community, certainly I appreciate the investment that they're making in the downtown of Strathroy. It's certainly a much more pleasant place already before people even move into it. So I thank them for what their investment in Strathroy.
Yeah, I had a chance to peek in there, and boy, it looks amazing what they've already, and that's just what there's lots more to come. So you're totally correct, Councillor Kennis. I just have one item. The Winterfest was touched on earlier. The turnout of people there was fantastic. The only thing, in some areas we should maybe look at maybe a little bit more lighting at night, because in some of the areas it was pretty dark for little kids to go across there. But the turnout was fantastic. Great job, whoever put that all together. Congratulations, because it was a great night. And we also have a new executive director for the Chamber of Commerce. Sean McGill is the new director. So I wish him all the best and all the good luck coming up in the future. We'd like to say goodbye to Kathy Manis and she's leaving us from the chamber, but she's going to the Burlington Chamber of Commerce. So congratulations to Kathy for moving up. I'm sure she'll do a great job there. She's done here. We'll miss her, but all the best to her. And that's all I have for comments. We do have an in-camera session to go to tonight. And, sorry, Councillor Pelkman.
Sorry, I missed one note. I'd like to thank those that organized the Santa drive-by. I know when they went by my place, all the kids were out in the street and very excited to see Santa. And thank you to those that took their time to organize it and participate in it. There was definitely more than one day there for them. So very appreciative of them doing that.
Great point, Councillor Pelkman. So we do have to move into camera. So I will need a resolution is required to move into a closed session to discuss property matters, legal matters, and a procedural matter as permitted under Section 239 of the Ontario Municipal Act and Council's procedural bylaw. So I've been looking for a mover and seconder to go into camera. Councillor Brennan, Councillor Pelkman. Is there anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Just take a couple of minutes to move things.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back. We are back into open session. And in our in-camera session, we had on the property matter and a legal matter. So now we're continuing on for scheduling of meetings. Our next meeting is Monday, December 20th at 6 p.m., Monday, January 17th at 6 p.m., and Monday, February the 7th at 6 p.m. You're hearing nothing else, and I'm looking for an adjournment motion. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Brennan, Councillor Kennis. Anyone opposed? Thank you, council, and we earned our money tonight. It's a long night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.